I've been a cosplayer since I was 14. My wife and I dated for years before we got married and stayed together for 10. At the time of this story, I was 31 and she was 33. Even though she was never as passionate about cosplaying as me, she would go with me. I could tell she was losing enthusiasm for it even more, but she still came with me, dressed as her favorite Star Wars character. While I was geeking out with my friends, she must have decided she was too mature for all this and left. I noticed she was gone, but I trusted her, assuming she went to the bathroom. She came back hours later. By this time, I had been casually looking for her for 2 hours. Maybe I trusted her too much, or maybe I was having too much fun. When she showed up, she was really happy but squirmish. She was holding her phone in her hand and said she just went for a walk for a while and found a small-time bookshop that she couldn't resist. She was reading all that time before coming back to me. I asked if she bought a book and she said no, looking pretty stupid. She started texting a little more often than normal, but she said it was her older sister catching up with her. She was pretty bubbly and texting off and on. It didn't seem like anything was wrong, but she also didn't seem interested in me or what we were doing. She took selfies with me and did what I wanted, but her heart wasn't in it. After dinner, we went to see a movie. We sat beside each other for the first 30 minutes. Then she had to go to the bathroom. She made sure to mention her stomach hurt, so I didn't expect her to come back very fast. Well, at nearly the end of the movie, I wandered out and yelled into the women's bathroom. No one responded to me. I started calling her over and over again while I went back to the hotel and found that she wasn't there either. I went to the convention, feeling exhausted and wondering what she was doing. There, she ran into me. She said I wasn't at the hotel. Before I even tried to respond to that, I noticed she wasn't wearing lipstick, contrary to how I saw her at the movies. It looked like she washed it off because there was nothing left. I smelled her slightly damp hair and it smelled like lemons, not like the shampoo in our hotel or the one we brought. I added all the odd disappearances, odd texting, odd smells, odd appearance, odd jiddiness, and wondered if she was cheating on me. Of course, I was going to have to check her phone and confront her about it, but before I said anything, her phone started ringing. She was already holding it in her hand, so in the moment she was registering who it was, I grabbed it from her. I answered the call and asked who it was. My male voice must have scared him off because he hung up. I tried calling back and got the voicemail of a deep-voiced, professional-sounding AP. I scrolled through their messages and found the arrangements they made for my wife to come over. They also talked about his stock marketing skills, and in the most recent message, AP confesses how quickly he's falling for her and how magical her body is. She was holding her face, ordering me to give her back her phone. Out of all the things she should have been saying, it was that. I yelled, "You cheated on me," loud enough for the costumed people around us to hear. They were already invested, having seen a circle around the convention a few times. They started booing her as I held up her phone with messages on the screen. I turned to walk out, but she followed me. Back at the hotel, she admitted she was just bored and felt like she was too mature to keep cosplaying every year. She quickly added that she realized now it was a huge mistake and she loved me for who I was. I looked her straight in the eyes and said she made me sick. As I packed, I told her I'd have to be a moron to stay married to her now, and she should have just talked out the differences with me before she spread her legs for a more interesting or more mature man. Now it's much, much too late to apologize, and I don't care about her at all. She's worth nothing or negative value if that's possible. She's like a black hole. Her level of putridness would affect anyone who gets close enough to her. I told her I would never care about what happened to her, and shoved my bags in the car. I left her there in a different state, but she didn't have any living relatives to come to her rescue. She didn't even have very close friends, so she stayed where I left her. She tried to go to AP, and he entertained her for a while, making her feel like everything was going to be okay. She was needy, barely had any money, and depended on him to take care of her all of a sudden. It was like adopting a child with no intentions of improving her situation beyond that. Funny thing is, she once accused me of being like a child, but I worked full-time. After he kicked her out, she started calling me every day to cry and leave me long, pitiful voicemails. When she finally came back to the state we were living in, she didn't attend any of our court hearings, and I sold anything she had in our home after 10 years of marriage. Her voicemails were pathetic, and she wouldn't stop because I was the only person she knew so well. She was in a world of strangers now. It's up to her to find what she needs. I used to be her provider and caregiver like a good husband, but it wasn't good enough. OP, I am so sorry your wife went with you to do something you loved, only to take advantage of your busy state and sneak off to cheat on you. She did not deserve to have a husband, let alone one as fun and respectable as you. From what you said, I can tell you valued the relationship you had and took pride in knowing how to communicate with your spouse. I'm sorry she didn't do the same for you and thought that she could find better with someone different. Different or new does not mean better, and in that moment of temptation, cheating women prove themselves idiots for failing to see the bigger picture. I wish you all the best going forward. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were married for 7 years and had been attending the same church for that long. Everyone had gotten to know us well, so the church agreed to let my wife start counseling members for free. She'd had a rough childhood, but managed to find faith and steer clear of drugs. She wanted to help others that couldn't afford counseling. Her intentions were so pure and good that the church, nor I, wouldn't have suspected her to do what she did. She operated as an unofficial counselor for years and came to know everyone in town through mutual friends. She never gossiped about people and became well respected for helping others, just what she wanted to do. This all changed when she met a sad, lonely man who was new to the church and coping with his wife being in a coma. She was in a car accident where he was driving, but it wasn't really his fault. He craved the company of a woman because she'd been in a coma for 7 months. She would counsel him and others in an office in the church, where they had all the time and privacy they needed. Given the situation, 7 months doesn't seem long enough for him to be willing to cheat on his wife, but it was. At the same time, 7 years of marriage seems to be worth more than 5 counseling sessions with an unfortunate man, but it wasn't. When we both got home on one of the worst days ever, she said she'd suddenly felt nauseous on the drive. She blamed something she ate and locked herself in the bathroom. I called through the door to ask if she needed anything, but she said no. She sounded so upset, more than just sick. I heard her struggling, but she still didn't come out. When she finally did, she took one look at me, and her lips started trembling. Her eyes poured tears, and when I rushed to her side, she pushed me away, claiming she didn't deserve it. She bursted out with, "I cheated on you." Felt like she shot me in the heart. I grabbed my chest and dropped onto the bed. She said she regretted it more than anything. She said it was the biggest mistake and stupidest thing she could have done. She said that AP's wife was in a coma and admitted he longed for a woman. I gasped. She cheated with a married man. I called her despicable and said she was supposed to be mine. She started crying so hard, she could barely talk. She said she would never counsel anyone again, but she needed me to forgive her. She was on her knees, sobbing onto my lap. When I gathered the strength and willpower to stand up for myself, I pushed her away. I said she was right, she didn't deserve my comfort or love. I wouldn't trust her to be around anyone without me. I told her having a relationship would be impossible now. I would be stupid to think there wasn't a better woman out there for me. I made her pack her stuff and leave on the threat I'd tell the church everything. She said she wouldn't survive the embarrassment from that, and would certainly need the church's support if I was to leave her. I asked if she deserved the church's support, and she said yes. This sounded to me like she wasn't learning her lesson, so after she finally left the house with a bunch of stuff, I called the church pastor. I told him what happened, and described AP's situation for him to figure out who it was. She was staying with family, and didn't realize I told the church until she walked in on Sunday morning, only to receive demeaned stares. No one spoke to her, and she was too afraid to speak to anyone else. Shortly after that, AP's wife woke up from her coma. It was really heartbreaking. Everyone knew AP cheated on her, so even if he wasn't the one to tell her, someone did. AP hated my wife for allowing him to do it, instead of being the good, honest counselor he needed her to be. The good, honest wife I expected her to be. I still blamed him a little bit, but he was right. He was the one feeling weak, but my wife wasn't strong enough to assure him that things were going to work out somehow. Not without breaking her vows to me, and encouraging him to break his vows to his wife. Still a little unbelievable to me. P was still divorced. It's not something to be forgiven, unless they want to remain unhappy, uncertain, and face higher chances of breaking up in the future. OP, your wife should have known better and held up to her goal of wanting to help people, instead of sabotaging so many relationships and much trust. When her loyalty to you and respect for what others were going through mattered the most, she failed. Sadly, people fail all the time, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't face the consequences. Her life and the lives of 3 others drastically changed. I am glad you chose not to forgive her, and that she couldn't bring herself to lie or pretend she didn't do anything wrong. At least the truth found its way out of her, and you told the church what happened. AP's wife deserved to know, too, so that the healing process can begin, and neither of you will be hurt by those people again. I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If this is a story you would like to share with me about your situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. I, 37, took my wife, 33, on an 11th year anniversary cruise. We worked jobs that we thought were bearable, but not exactly thrilling, so this cruise was something we both really looked forward to. I wanted us to meet other people and socialize, because why not? I wasn't sure we'd be lucky enough to meet long-term friends, but at least people to chat with. Wouldn't you know it, on the first night we met a really nice couple. The wife's name was Susie. After talking and gabbing away for a while by the bar, the 4 of us agreed to meet the next day as well. By the pool, the husband admits he's looking for a couple to swing with. Susie is shocked he actually brought it up, and clearly doesn't agree with it. She looks sad that he wants to do such a thing. I agree with her, and tell him we aren't looking to compromise our relationship. He plays it off, saying it's not like that, but I disagreed. Susie was relieved, but my wife actually looked disappointed. I made a mental note to quiz her about it sometime. Susie and her husband started talking about all the adventures they went on together. My wife looked envious and continued staring at Susie's husband. I didn't know at the time, but she got his number. We both dressed up nice, and she came with me to the casino. She was entertained for a while, but eventually she wandered off while I played poker. She told me she'd be right back, but she didn't come back even in an hour. I left the table and started looking for her and calling her over and over. Looking for her felt like a helpless waste of time, because the boat was huge. What are the chances I'd run into Susie, who was also looking for her own spouse? When we saw each other, we panicked. I suggested we both go check our staterooms and meet back here with whatever we found. She agreed, and I raced back to mine, but no one was there. When I came out, I was feeling nauseous and picturing Susie walking in on them. 2 security guards passed by me just then, looking like they were on a mission. For some reason, I got hunched to follow them. They passed by where I told Susie to meet, so I waved her over. As we followed them, she said she didn't find anything, and he still wasn't answering his phone. I told her I thought these guys might be onto something. They led us straight to the comedy club, which was currently empty, but the doors were unlocked for a show in 3 hours. They called out, "Excuse me," and I jumped. Then I noticed 2 people's heads behind a bar. They were quietly swearing, and I heard my wife apologize and ask security to hold on a moment. I covered my mouth to try to hold my face together. I couldn't believe this was happening. Susie was also in disbelief. As soon as they stepped out, I could only ask my wife what the hell was happening. Susie screamed. Security just noticed we were behind them and asked if we were a couple. We clarified that we were their spouses, and they were cheating, so security left their consequences up to us. They stepped aside to let us hash it out with them, but there wasn't much to say. I just stared at my wife and shook my head. I kept asking why she did this, but she just chalked it up to temptation she couldn't refuse. It hurt. I told her she wasted 11 years of our lives, but she said she didn't see it as a waste. I told her she was downplaying what she did. Our relationship was something I treasured and honored, but now it was a waste because it was over. I would have to start with someone new, someone I'd have to learn how to trust after she broke me. She started crying, But her wailing of regret didn't start until I told security that I voted for option C, which was to have her forced off the cruise ship at whatever port was next. It would be up to her to find a way home, and without me, she was going to be scared and uncomfortable. Susie bravely agreed with me, signing up her cheating spouse for the same fate. They were both yelling in protest as they were led away to their individual holding cells. Of course, since we were their spouses, we could get off at the next port with them, but we chose not to. We weren't lonely, though. Before they were kicked off, we gave them their luggage and passports. They were absolutely miserable. AP was just mad, and walked off without so much as a goodbye to his betrayed wife, and gave no indication that he intended to stay with my wife, either. My wife was on her knees holding onto my legs. She hated traveling, which is why we weren't on a road trip. Now she had to figure out how to get back, which could include a plane flight, her worst phobia. She got home a month after me. She had sunburn and said she had to do questionable things to get back. Now she owes her uncle $400 as well. I said she was welcome to get her pile of belongings out of my yard. I pulled off a tarp, covering all her things that I pulled out of the house. I told her she was lucky I didn't sell it all. She couldn't believe I still went through with the divorce, so I told her this was her reality check. She was not expecting to lose me on her 11th wedding anniversary, but maybe that's because she didn't think through what might happen and what she might deserve. OP, I am so sorry your wife left you for another man on your anniversary cruise. She should have been thankful and appreciative toward you for being a faithful man and partner to her all those years. Instead, she completely ruins the very thing you two were celebrating. She had to be very inconsiderate and selfish. She must have been willing to lie to you after this, to keep what she'd done a secret. She didn't plan on losing you. She planned on secretly betraying you, and she almost got away with it. Thank goodness for security and cameras. I'm proud of you for choosing to have her kicked off the boat. There's no way you deserve to have to share a room with her on your anniversary after she cheated. She deserved to face the struggle and insecurity, and you deserved a better spouse. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for today. My wife went out with her 3 best friends for her 25th birthday. We were married for 2 years, together for 4. Everything about our relationship was amazing. Our chemistry and care for each other seemed like it would last forever. I trusted her to go to the concert without me because it was her friend's treat, and I didn't want to impose. It was a heavy metal band, and they did not anticipate the shocking event that would occur. As soon as the music began, and the group was about to come out, the crowd made a mad stampede for the stage. Rows 1 to 5 were jumped over and people were climbed over. My wife was separated from her friends involuntarily, like being caught in a wave. When it got to where there couldn't fit any more people, my wife was at risk of being seriously injured. One strong security guy just happened to be right beside her, noticed her struggle, and succeeded in pulling her over the rib-high fence. They both continued helping people escape the pressure until 10 entire minutes after that, when the fence fell. There were severe injuries, so the concert was canceled. I saw a broadcast about it on the news and tried calling my wife over and over, but she wouldn't answer. I was starting to assume the worst and called one of her friends. This girl was upset, but not hurt, and said they got separated. She hadn't seen her, which I didn't take for a good sign. By the time the concert would have normally been over, my wife walked in the door. She was happy and calm. Sensing this unexpected demeanor, I let her emotion take the lead in our conversation. She started by greeting me happily. She said she had a great time, and she appreciates me for trusting her to go out with her friends. I felt the hair stand up on my neck. She was thanking me for trusting her, but she was pretending the concert happened, and she loved it. I was speechless. I said she was welcome, and she only ever proved to me that she deserved my trust and love. She just smiled faintly and yawned. I was super uncertain about how to behave in front of her. I was glad she was alive, but now I suspected her of cheating on me and thinking she could get away with it. After she went to bed, I tried to check her phone, but it was locked down and sealed tight. No message previews or anything. I decided I needed to confront her, so I woke her up, hoping her grudginess and panic would help me catch her in her lies. I told her I knew what happened, and that there was no concert because of the overly aggressive crowd. I followed that up by quickly demanding she tell me where she was all that time I tried calling her. She said, a lot, and at first just admitted a man helped her to safety. She elaborated on how much he saved her life, and then said they just hung out afterwards. I told her I wasn't an idiot, and asked if he expected something extra special in exchange for saving her life. I saw her reels turning, and after a moment, she worked up some fake tears and said he took advantage of her. I immediately said if that was true, she needed to give me her unlocked phone so I could search it, and then call the police on AP. She turned red and said no. She said I didn't need to go that far. I asked in pretense shock why I shouldn't, if AP just did what she said. She reluctantly gave me her phone, unlocked. I was staring at her so she didn't try to look at her newest message. I could tell she was holding her breath as I read. It was from someone programmed as Maddie, but based on the context, I could tell for sure that Maddie was a man, and my wife was a willing participant in what they did just a few hours earlier. I showed it to her and asked what excuse she had for it. She was stumped. She started real crying, and it was quite a difference. She changed tactics and started begging me to forgive her. I just laughed, and I verbally expressed my anger and disappointment. I said I wished I never met her, and she was a waste of time and space. I informed her that she didn't need to spread her legs just because he saved her. It was just luck, and a genuine thank you, maybe a gift card would have been fine, but now our relationship is over. She didn't have anything useful to say, and she wouldn't matter to me ever again. So I kicked her out around 2 a.m. She was cold, miserable, and desperate. Trying to avoid bringing her parents into it, she called AP. He did not want her to come back over, and to avoid the awkward reasoning of why, he hung up. I was laughing through the cracked window. She caved pretty quickly and called her parents. She didn't even have her own car, which meant AP gave her a ride home that night, and she counted on her father to come get her after I found out. He had to work at 5 a.m. and made her feel worse about not being able to patch things up with me for the night or ever. Little did he know she was about to become his dependent again for the next 2 years. I don't know what happened after that, but I was lucky to find a respectable woman that hasn't failed me yet. I'm thankful I didn't spend more time with my ex before this happened. OP, your wife was supposed to have a fun night with her friends, but when that became interrupted, she decided to cheat on you. I am shocked that she couldn't have been more thoughtful about just how despicable this choice would be. That man saving her did not make you less deserving of a moral and honest wife, and that's what she failed to consider. She only thought about herself and believed you would never find out. She deserved to be cold, miserable, and desperate because she dishonored the man she committed herself to. Warmth, happiness, and security are for the loyal, trustworthy wives. I am so glad you saw the news report and paid attention to her behavior. You refused to forgive or keep her, and acted as an example for us all to follow when or if we are faced with an unfaithful spouse. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I met my wife while we were in high school. She was the first girl I ever confessed my feelings to, and I was lucky enough to have them reciprocated. We were pretty much inseparable after this. I only wanted to go through my crappy high school days if she was there with me. Something about her, maybe it was her aura, made me feel so much more peace. I was there for her through her parents' divorce and her mom's untimely death. Her mom had cheated on her father after 27 years of marriage, and my wife believed the amount of remorse and guilt she felt is what caused her to pass away. The divorce and passing of his ex-wife just made my wife's dad even more certain there was a family curse. Despite this troubling time, our relationship and love for each other never faltered. We got married at the ages of 19 and 20. My wife's outlook on life wasn't the best all the time, but she understood that there were ups and downs, and that life didn't owe us anything. Despite that, we were happy and capable, remaining strong for each other. We planned to wait at least 5 years before having children, but my wife became pregnant with our first child at the age of 22. She wasn't very happy, and she blamed it on her nervousness to become a mother. I assured her that we could do anything together, and that this was how family life was supposed to happen. In marriage, the children are conceived and the parents work through any obstacles life throws at them. My wife started to believe me and felt more hopeful and strong. Things were blissful up to and after the flawless birth of our daughter. That's when my wife's mind started to change. She didn't see herself in the same way she did before she had a baby. She never acknowledged how much value she put in her physical appearance. Once her belly was wrinkled and saggy, she had a hard time even leaving the house. She was a stay-at-home mom and always wanted me to do the errands when I was off work. Sometimes I was too exhausted, and I genuinely needed her to go. Whenever this happened, she didn't fight me, she just went and got it done. Dates were non-existent. She wanted to stay at home because she didn't have anything to wear, or any number of extra excuses she had that all pertained to her appearance. I didn't mind dating at home, and we even had her father or my parents watch our daughter for us while we had some time alone. I always told her she was my woman for life, and that I would always love her body unconditionally. That's all anyone can ask for, right? I knew she was my wife for life, and I never put any conditions on that, including her appearance. I told her I would spare some money for her to get clothes she liked to wear, but she didn't want to buy clothes at that size. I told her I would work out with her every day, but she always made an excuse as to why she couldn't. She started talking about the family curse her dad believed in. I told her that just wasn't logical, and that she had to be the master of her fate to the best of her ability. My message went unheard until she was involved in a very bad car accident. A car pulled out in front of her, causing her to veer off the road and off an embankment. Her car rapped a tree and started smoking. When I got to the hospital, she was conscious enough to tell me that someone saved her life. She said a man climbed down seconds after her and pulled her up the steep wall to safety right before her car exploded. I could hardly believe it. I told her that after this, she could say the curse was broken because she survived. She asked me to ask anyone in the hospital or police force if they knew who that man was. I tried to find out for her, but no one knew. After she was discharged, life at home was almost back to normal. I noticed she wasn't struggling with her self-esteem or overall doubt anymore. She told me she believed that the curse was broken because she survived. I was happy for her and loved this positive change. In hindsight, I did notice a few clues. I found a cigarette butt in her front yard. I asked my wife about it and she played dumb. She suggested it belonged to the lawn guy. My wife was spending more time on her phone, but doing it at times I wouldn't notice because of being at work, being in the bathroom, being in a different room than her when she was cooking dinner or when she was gardening. I never noticed enough to bring it up to her, and the biggest thought I had about it was that she was glad to be alive and was keeping in touch with her relatives and friends. Shortly after I came to this conclusion, I arrived home to find a strange car in the driveway. I could smell burgers and dogs in the backyard. When I got back there, I saw my wife talking to another man while he cooked on the grill. I asked them both what was going on, trying to be nice just in case. This wasn't something I needed to be alarmed about. My wife smiled and introduced me to her hero, the man that saved her from the car. My stomach flipped. I didn't feel great about this. I never really wanted my wife to have male friends, especially not one that she felt indebted to. I didn't have any female friends because I refused to give temptation an opportunity. He was a good-looking man, and taller than me by a few inches. No wedding ring. Through awkward chit-chat over dinner in the backyard, I found out he was a firefighter, and that before saving my wife, he'd saved 3 dogs and 2 cats from burning buildings. My wife loved that. I felt nauseous. I called it a night and started cleaning up. My wife was disappointed, but let him leave. She was exceptionally quiet for a few days after this. I tried to tell her I didn't want her to be friends with him because it was unnecessary and just opening the door to temptation. She said I needed to trust her to be a responsible married woman and that she would always keep their conversations PG. I told her I didn't like or want this. We dropped it for a few days until she sheepishly asked me if she could go out for a AP. I told her absolutely not. She was upset and said I was being controlling and that she could have her own friends without me being there. I told her that before all this happened, she never went out anywhere, not even with me, so I asked her what made her suddenly want to go with this man. She didn't have an answer besides that he was a good friend, and she did want to start going out more. I told her we could go out together, and I'd ask her dad to babysit. She made a face. I knew at this point our marriage was in trouble. She didn't want to go out with me as much as Hero. I told her if she wasn't going out with me, she wasn't going out with him. I suggested she meet other stay-at-home moms so she could meet up with them and get out of the house. She jumped on this opportunity. The next day, she texted me while I was at work, telling me she found a group of moms that meet at the park every Wednesday to do yoga and let the kids play together. When she was supposed to be there, I left work to check. I found a group of moms doing yoga, so she could have been telling the truth, except my wife and daughter weren't with them. I went home and didn't see AP's car. I opened the front door quietly. I heard our daughter crying from her room upstairs and music coming from the finished basement. My heart started pounding. As I got closer to the basement, I heard the unmistakable sounds of passion. My wife's voice mixed with another man's. I walked down the stairs filming. My wife went all out for this. At least 50 tea candles were lit with rose petals scattered all around. They were having sex on the pool table. As soon as my wife turned her head and saw me, she jumped up and started saying no over and over again, realizing she was caught red-handed. She grabbed a blanket and told me I wasn't supposed to be here. AP started frantically grabbing his clothes and telling me he didn't want any trouble. I told him he was a crap hero and he didn't deserve respect from anyone. He was in such a hurry to leave, I didn't have to say anything else to him. I dialed her father as she freaked out, cried, and demanded to know who I was calling. The first thing I told him was that I just walked in on his daughter cheating on me. I put him on speaker while he said he was devastated and he never thought his daughter would do the same thing her mother did to destroy the family and cause so much heartbreak. She turned furious and didn't want to hear it. She tried to grab the phone from me, hanging up on her father, but I ran upstairs with it and locked myself in her daughter's room, picking her up to stop her crying. My wife frantically knocked on the door, tried to open it, and told me to let her in a few times before she started wailing and begging me for my forgiveness. She called me her husband several times as if that was enough for me to forgive her. She admitted she wasn't thinking about me or our daughter or how much our marriage and family would be affected by her actions. I told her this was hopeless. She wanted me to trust her, but now proved she was a liar and cheater. She told me she knew what she did was a mistake, but she didn't do it out of love for him. She did it because AP made her feel better about herself. I told her she shouldn't have needed another man's or anyone's validation. I was her husband and the only man in her life for a reason. That's what marriage is. You don't rely on anyone but yourself and your spouse for meeting your emotional needs. I told her that emotions ultimately are not important and don't have to be an uncontrollable force of poor decision-making. She is supposed to make decisions based on what is best for her and her family, not fantasies or selfish desires. She didn't know what to say, so she just cried. When I finally opened the door and told her to leave, she lost her mind, screaming, telling me I couldn't just kick her out and separate her from our daughter. I told her I was going to file for divorce. She said until she was ordered to leave, she was going to continue living with me and our daughter, even if we slept in different rooms. And so we did that until our day in court. I showed the film of her cheating on me and got out of alimony payments. On top of that, her father's house didn't have enough rooms for our daughter to live, so I won custody. They got visitation, but they are both miserable and bitter to this day. My ex-wife has no one to blame but herself. She's completely lost her identity because of this. She has nothing to call her own and is too depressed to try to get a job or make friends. OP, this is an excellent example of why you should never let your emotions make decisions for you. Gaining control over yourself and your emotions is something every person should learn and practice. Life doesn't owe you anything, and your actions, no matter how thought out they are, will have consequences that affect more people than just you. It's a shame that so many women today have an entitled and selfish ego that ultimately leads them to devastation and loneliness. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish you all the best. Now for our second story. My wife, 27 female, and I, 24 male, met at the Burning Man Festival. At the time, I had just graduated college and started a full-time job in Nevada. She lived and worked in Colorado. When we got to talking, I realized I never wanted to stop talking to her. I felt myself falling for her and wishing we lived closer. We exchanged numbers and started talking as soon as the festival ended. Really, She texted me even before I reached my car. We maintained a long-distance relationship for a year before she asked me to move in with her. I found a job in her state and packed my bags. It was only another year before I bought a house and proposed to her. Neither of us had more than 2 family members that kept in touch, so we had a small wedding ceremony with them. Our marriage was just what I wanted and expected it to be. I was convinced I had met the coolest, most suitable and exciting woman I could find. I wanted to love her forever, and she said the same to me. Before I moved in with her, she wasn't a very tidy person, but she made it a goal of hers to keep a clean, organized home for us. By the time we moved into her house, she was a wonderful housekeeper and a woman worthy of being a wife. She also really enjoyed her full-time job, working for a boss that was also her best friend. I heard a lot of great things about Tiffany. They met in college and remained close until Tiffany's business was well enough off the ground that she could hire people. My wife was there for her and proved herself to be an excellent employee. Since my wife was there from the start, she made a generous salary. I never met Tiffany, but my wife and her went out together every once in a while to blow off work steam, they'd say. About 4 years after we were married, I noticed my wife was holding her phone a lot, more than she used to. She started holding on to it or keeping it in her pockets. I seriously doubted this meant anything bad, because my wife was still just as sweet and attentive as she always was. Looking back on it, she might have been even more sweet and attentive than usual. On one ordinary Friday evening, she texted me that she was going out with Tiffany. I replied that I would meet my brother for dinner and see her at home by 9. I left the house to meet him, but he canceled plans. I returned home and went straight to the bathroom before turning any lights on. While I was in there, I heard the front door open and 2 voices. I turned off the bathroom light and listened. I heard my wife giggle and open the backsliding door. Then I heard a man's voice. I watched them from within the shadows of the house. They stripped off their clothes and jumped in the pool. They frolicked and splashed around for a bit before they started making out and having sex. I grabbed the man's pants, found his wallet, and took his ID. His last name sounded familiar. I got in my car and drove to his house. I knocked on the door and was greeted by a gorgeous woman. I handed her her husband's ID and told her what he was doing at my house with my wife. She didn't want to believe it at first, but as it sunk in, she became devastated. She started cursing and grabbing anything of his to throw outside. She invited me to wait with her inside for him to return home. I didn't really want to, but I also didn't want to go home, so we waited. He arrived home and his wife handed him his ID. He was confused and even more so when I stepped forward. I told him I found that in his wallet in his pants after he stripped for my wife. His jaw dropped and he just looked between us before getting frustrated and embarrassed, asking what was going to happen now. His wife kicked him out right in front of me. I wanted to leave, but she took a moment from yelling to ask me to stay. Once he was out of the house, she sat down with me and apologized for what happened on behalf of her husband and my wife. We got to talking, and it didn't take long for me to realize this was Tiffany. This was my wife's best friend and boss. I freaked out and told her who my wife was. She could not believe it. She called my wife and told her she needed her to come over right away. When she got there, we both confronted her, telling her she just cheated on me with her best friend's husband. My wife freaked out, crying, swearing that she didn't know he was her husband. She looked at me and pleaded for me to believe that this was just a mistake. She said they had met at a bar and that he wasn't wearing a ring. I asked her when and why she was even at a bar alone, but then I said it didn't matter. And it didn't matter how sorry she was, because she still willingly brought another man into my house and slept with him. Tiffany said even if my wife didn't know he was her husband, she was not the kind of friend or employee she needed in her life. My wife was broken in that instant. She didn't know what to do with herself. She just kept pleading with empty words. I told her to move out of my house. Tiffany invited me back inside. She screamed after us and even banged on the door. Eventually, she was moved out of my house and the divorce was final. She was a huge waste of my time, but if it weren't for her, I never would have met my current wife of 12 years, Tiffany. Our exes didn't stay together after this. Their relationship was based entirely on fleeting emotions, infatuation, and excitement. I believe anyone could make any relationship work if they were selfless and wanted it enough. Of course, the feeling must be reciprocated for the relationship to last. Sometimes clear and honest communication is enough to get a drifting spouse to realize how much their partner and relationship means to them. No adult should be making such a foolish decision. Given enough thought, these mistakes could be avoided. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. My wife always had a passion for the sea. She worked as a lifeguard on a beach. I tried not to be jealous while I worked my office job. I believe she was a good woman. Our relationship was her first serious relationship that resulted in marriage. She told me she knew we were made for each other. What she failed to realize was that she was not nearly mature enough to be so committed to this idea of forever. She was longing for adventure without me, beyond her normal workday. She didn't come home when I expected one day. I called her once at 30 minutes late, and again at 1 hour and 15 minutes late. I knew she was a grown, responsible woman, and I didn't want to be the harping father type of husband. When she did get home, she was acting very strange. It was in a way that seemed like she thought she was acting normal, but didn't realize I knew her better than she even did. She didn't see her own behavior in the mirror every day, and for that reason, I knew something happened today that didn't normally happen. I tried asking her what was wrong, or what happened today that delayed her. She acted like nothing different happened, but since she was late, she eventually said she stopped at the market to walk around during the sunset. I bought it for the night and we went to bed. Nothing happened then either, which was disappointing. In the morning, I woke up to her kneeling beside my side of the bed, sobbing into the sheets. The first thing she said was that she didn't mean to do it. She said she just wanted to do something fun and spontaneous, and it wasn't supposed to escalate the way it did. My heart started racing, and I felt like I'd been awake for hours. I asked her what she was talking about. She swallowed hard, started pulling her hair, and said she just started chatting with a man after he docked his boat. She was just walking, enjoying the sunset, and asked him about his boat. Their conversation continued until he invited her on the boat. Sounded fun, and he just seemed like a friendly person. She started sobbing again, and said she messed up. I asked if she cheated on me, and she could only nod. I jumped up and started packing my stuff. She kept crying, and found it hard to believe that I refused to give her a second chance, since she was being honest and telling me the truth. I told her she was being honest, about the fact that she didn't deserve me, and she was a sleazy girl for sleeping with some guy when she could have said no. I told her I wouldn't be the man to forgive her for wasting years of my life, and convincing me to believe she had self-control and dedication to me. That was all I said, even though she was trying to get me to say more for another 30 minutes while I got all my essentials. I knew if said anything else, it would only hurt me more. I went to my brother's house and filed for divorce. She started showing up once she figured out where I was staying, and did anything she could to get me to take her back. I wouldn't answer the door. Thankfully, my brother helped by dismissing her. I could have done it, but it's good to have supporters that help you do the harder thing, because it's the right thing to do for your future. I only told her one more thing. One day, when she tried contacting me, I told her she never should have gotten on the boat, and I refused to be made a fool for taking her back or thinking she wouldn't do this ever again. If I was the one to spend time with another woman alone, people would have easily said I was cheating on her. She left me alone, but couldn't stay in the house, so she moved in with someone else. Somehow, everyone she worked and socialized with found out she cheated on me. So gossip spread and everyone labeled her as someone to avoid. Her roommate was nearly cut off from society just for having her live there, so she kicked her out. I think she moved out of town or something, because why would anyone stay in a town where everyone knows you're a piece of crap? Since she left, my life's been going swimmingly. I started dating a woman that works at the library, and even though it's hard to live alone after years of having someone with me, I coped. Now my girlfriend sleeps over sometimes, and I look forward to that. We're adaptable to change, but there's never a reason to accept an unfaithful spouse. OP, your wife should have known better than to get in a stranger's boat. Maybe she got on his boat knowing she was going to sleep with him, so she felt like she wouldn't be misleading him or getting into a dangerous situation. It's always a better idea to leave a cheating spouse than to forgive them, because you just don't know the real reasoning behind why it happened. No matter what the reason is, they didn't have enough respect or discipline to maintain an honest and viable relationship. Everyone deserves to have someone genuinely love them without failing to take their dedication seriously. I am glad you followed through with leaving her and told her what she needed to hear. You're an example on how to handle such a situation. Surround yourself with people you trust and only maintain the attitude that you will make it through this unexpected life change. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into our second story for today. My girlfriend and I had just moved in together for a year. I thought everything was great. We each went to our respective jobs and spent time together at home when we were off. She got home 4 hours before I did, and usually got changed, made dinner, did some cleaning and stuff around the house, and whatever leisure activity suited her mood. When I got back, she would update me on her day, and vice versa. These things didn't happen when I got home one night. I noticed she was still wearing her work clothes, only just starting on dinner, and looked worried that I was back already. I asked her what was going on, and she played dumb. I asked her if she just got home, because it was obvious. She said yes, reluctantly, and seemed to be trying in vain to come up with a reason why she'd be back so late. I pressured her, and she didn't like that. She snapped and said she didn't think it was fair for me to be questioning her like this. Then she threw out that she stopped at the store after work, and I did notice one grocery bag that she still hadn't unpacked. I looked inside, and it had a room temperature bag of shrimp in it. I asked if she planned on cooking them, since whatever she was keeping from me gave it enough time to thaw out. I continued pressuring her to tell me where she was after the store, but she refused and eventually settled for sleeping on the couch, so I would leave her alone. I brainstormed, but I couldn't think of what to do. I looked at her phone, but it was clean as a whistle, which made me second-guess myself. I was wrong for doing that because it was obvious something was different. The next morning, after she already left, one of our neighbors came to me with something that would change the course of our lives. She said she had something upsetting to show me, but I needed to know. She showed me her Ring camera's recorded motions. It was my girlfriend in each clip, entering a neighbor's door adjacent to this lady's own front door. She looked happy in each clip, but the first one explained everything. She said she locked herself out of our apartment, but that was a lie. AP invited her inside, and she didn't come out until 45 minutes later, leaving with a huge smile, holding her keys. The next clips were similar, but each time took less introduction, and eventually none. I thanked this woman for showing me the evidence. I thanked her as genuinely as I could. She sent the clips to me. Funny that my girlfriend arrived home and parked the car right on time that day. She wasn't too happy to see me standing by the stairs, but it was nothing compared to how she was about to feel. I showed it to her and she started stammering. She looked at me, back to the phone, back to me. She slowly suggested that he needed help moving some stuff around, and accepted her help cleaning. I laughed and suggested we go ask him. I grabbed her by the hand, and we walked up the stairs, but at the top, she started to pull away. I told her if she was seeing a man every day alone in his apartment, I should know him as well as she does. I knocked on his door, and as soon as he saw us, he slammed it shut. I let go of my girlfriend's hand like it was a snake. I called her a cheater and sped walk to my apartment to shut her out, locking the top lock as well. She screamed no and all the words guilty women say. She kept knocking on my door for a while. I eventually opened it, just the crack that the chain would allow, and slipped her from. I needed her to get off my doorstep sometime that night. At one point, I noticed she went to AP's house to knock on the door, but their exchange was quite short. Turns out he had a girlfriend. She was eventually picked up, and some older man I never saw helped her load her stuff into his van. I found out later that it was a friend of her father's, who was looking to rent out his unfinished basement. It did not sound ideal, but my wife had no choice and no friends to take her in on such short notice, and under these shameful circumstances. When they asked why, and wanted to know what was going on, she tried to lie, but that only made the situation seem less severe. They gave her some advice, but mostly encouraged her to work things out with me. She eventually settled into the crappy bed she made for herself. One day, when I got home from work, I bumped into AP's girlfriend on the way into his apartment. I asked her if that was her boyfriend's door, and she said yes, curiously. I said there was something she needed to know, and it grabbed her attention. She watched the videos of my girlfriend entering, and she was shocked. She banged on the door and pushed him inside when he opened it, screaming at him and slamming the door behind her. So at least she knew the truth. I know these things happen, and I'm trying to keep my head up in good faith that I handled this the right way, and hopefully won't be hurt again. OP, your girlfriend proved her worthlessness as a lifelong partner by entering another man's apartment before you got home. She completely betrayed you and didn't deserve to have a safe place to live with any man. I am so proud of you for taking each step you did, including asking her about being late coming home, even though you got home after her. After you had the proof, it's good you went down to her car to greet her and confront her infidelity. Once AP slammed the door, you didn't waste time talking to her, because she only would have tried to convince you to forgive her. There was no need to let her back in the apartment until the neutral party arrived to help remove her belongings. You certainly handled this well, and even told AP's girlfriend the truth. I respect you and wish you all the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.